You felt it, didn't you? That quiet hesitation right before clicking this video. Your finger hovered over the screen. A sudden flutter in your stomach. A tiny voice whispering that you should keep scrolling to something easier. Something familiar. That isn't just your attention span acting up. It is the skip reflex. It is a very real, subtle form of archonic interference, designed to keep you comfortably asleep in the rhythms you already know. But you stayed, because deep down, you are profoundly tired. Not just physically, but soully. Notice how your shoulders carry an invisible weight. Even when you are just sitting safely in your living room, there is a persistent tightening in the chest that no amount of green juice, morning meditation, or meticulous habit tracking seems to cure. You have done everything the self-improvement industry told you to do. You rewired your brain, optimized your daily routine, and forced yourself into a state of relentless positivity. Yet, the scaffolding of your life feels surprisingly hollow. Why does trying so hard feel like suffocation? The truth is gentle, but it unravels everything. You are not actually healing. You are simply upgrading your prison. When we use neuroplasticity to build better habits, we are often just making ourselves more efficient at surviving inside a system that feeds on our endless striving. If you are ready to step off this exhausting neural treadmill, to stop fixing the avatar and start remembering the observer, join the awaken. Subscribe to this channel and let's decode the reality together. Picture this. Your consciousness is like a magnificent radio, capable of picking up an infinite range of beautiful, cosmic frequencies. But society has taped your dial down to a single, anxiety-inducing station. The modern rewiring industry doesn't teach you how to remove that tape. It merely sells you better speakers so the static of the matrix sounds clearer. You become a highly functional captive, but your soul remembers the wider frequency. It remembers the warmth and freedom of the open dial. This is where the exhaustion comes from. The fatigue you feel isn't a sign of failure. It is a productive irritation. Your body is physically rejecting the false upgrade, sending out powerful recalibration signals. Watch what happens in your body during these moments of sudden, unexplainable tiredness. It is your soul refusing to write another line of code for the matrix. Awakening isn't about becoming a better, shinier version of yourself. It is about stripping bare the illusions, so you can finally breathe. Society loves the word neuroplasticity. We are taught that with enough discipline, we can mold our brains like clay. You wake up early. You meditate. You write in your gratitude journal. It feels productive, like you are finally taking control of the wheel. We treat our minds like a house that constantly needs renovation. But what if the house itself is built on a foundation that isn't yours? The ability to adapt is a beautiful, natural human trait. But inside the matrix, this gift is quietly weaponized. Consider this for a moment. When you rewire your brain to handle a soul-crushing job, or a lifestyle that leaves you feeling empty at the end of the day, you aren't actually healing. You are simply increasing your tolerance for suffering. You are using the magic of neuroplasticity to become a more efficient battery for a system that does not have your best interests at heart. In esoteric terms, you are attaching yourself to new pendulums, invisible structures of thought that siphon your vital energy while convincing you that you are making meaningful progress. The ego loves the self-help industry. It adores the idea of improving because improvement keeps the mind endlessly occupied in the physical world. As long as you are busy fixing your perceived flaws, you are distracted from a much deeper, warmer reality. You were never broken to begin with. This is the ultimate archonic interference. The system doesn't stop you by throwing massive obstacles in your path. It stops you by handing you a brightly colored treadmill and calling it a mountaintop. Watch what happens in your body right now as you hear this. Notice if there is a sudden, subtle tension in your jaw, or a defensive tightness in your chest. That friction is entirely normal. It is the ego realizing that years of exhausting effort might have been aimed at the wrong target. But beneath that tension, there is also a profound sense of relief. Let that relief wash over you. It is the feeling of permission to finally drop the heavy, tiring armor of constant self-improvement. Awakening always follows a specific escalation logic. It begins as a whisper, a subtle knowing that something in your perfectly optimized life is deeply off. Perhaps you are sitting with friends, drinking coffee, and suddenly the conversation feels like a script everyone is reciting. The whisper is your soul memory surfacing, trying to gently remind you of your original blueprint. But instead of listening to the whisper with compassion, we usually try to heal it. We label this cosmic disconnect as a problem to be solved. We throw positive affirmations at it. We try to hack our dopamine to force ourselves back into alignment with the artificial, rushing rhythm of society. By doing this, we actively participate in our own suppression. We use our beautiful, malleable brains to build stronger, softer walls round the observer within. The tragedy of the modern spiritual seeker is that they use the very tools of liberation to construct a more comfortable cage. But the soul cannot be permanently silenced by good habits. If you ignore the whisper, it becomes a sign. Synchronicities will start to pop up in your everyday life. The things that used to bring you joy will suddenly feel a bit hollow. This isn't a punishment, and you are not doing anything wrong. It is simply your inner frequency rising, creating an undeniable mismatch with your old environment. You are outgrowing the simulation, and the physical exhaustion you feel is just the growing pains of a consciousness expanding beyond its old vessel. You do not need to be fixed, because you are not a machine. You are a vast, luminous observer temporarily experiencing this physical density. The moment you realize that your neuroplasticity has been hijacked to serve the demiurge, the architects of the illusion, you instantly reclaim your power. You don't have to fight the system with anger. You just have to gently stop voluntarily downloading its updates. Imagine the warmth and peace that comes when you finally step off the treadmill. You don't need a better morning routine to be worthy of existence. You just need to be here, present, witnessing the grand play of reality without the desperate need to change the script. When you stop rewiring the avatar, you finally give the soul the quiet space it needs to speak. This is where true sovereignty begins, not in endless doing, but in the radical, comforting act of simply being. Let us explore a brilliant concept from a visionary scientist named Itzhak Bentov. He did not see human beings as merely flesh and bone. He saw us as magnificent, highly sensitive antennas. Imagine you are sitting in your favorite chair, gently turning the dial on a beautifully crafted, vintage radio. You are naturally designed to pick up the vast, comforting, and beautiful frequencies of the universe. For a long time, you were tuned into the frequency of the everyday world, the hustle, the expectations, the constant need to produce. But then, something miraculous starts to happen. Without you even trying, your internal dial begins to shift. Your consciousness gently elevates to a softer, more profound frequency. Suddenly, the old station, the one playing the loud, repetitive tune of endless self-improvement and societal pressure, starts to sound like harsh static. This is what you are experiencing right now. It is a simple, biological mismatch between the new, peaceful rhythm of your soul and the old, rigid hardware of your daily routines. Society, and often the self-help world, misunderstands this static completely. They tell you that if you are feeling unmotivated or disconnected from your perfectly planned life, your radio must be broken. They hand you more tools to fix it. New productivity hacks, stricter schedules, and more intense morning routines. They want you to force the dial back to where it was. But your soul is gently rebelling against this. What you are feeling is not a breakdown. It is a beautiful, natural process of recalibration. Watch what happens in your body during these moments when you try to force yourself into an old, productive habit. Notice the sudden, inexplicable heaviness in your limbs, or the deep, quiet urge to simply sit down and close your eyes. This is a profound somatic cue. It is your physical body acting as a faithful protector, refusing to process the artificial, rushed frequencies of the external world any longer. Your body isn't failing you. It is wisely asking for a comforting pause. Bentov talked about the concept of the wild pendulum. Think of your daily energy like a pendulum swinging back and forth. When we are caught in the grind, the world demands that our pendulum swings rapidly, constantly reacting and doing. But as you awaken to your true nature, that frantic swinging begins to slow down. It wants to find its natural resting place. It wants to hover in that warm, peaceful space in the center, where you do not have to do anything at all to be valuable. When your pendulum slows, the fast-paced world around you feels chaotic and overwhelming. You might mistake this need for a stillness as laziness or a loss of purpose. But let us reframe that gently. This stillness is actually a productive irritation. It is the soft friction of your authentic self rubbing up against an environment that no longer fits. It is a clear, undeniable sign that you are outgrowing the small, cramped spaces you once thought were your entire universe. Your heart, as Bentov discovered, acts as a master oscillator. It sets the magnetic rhythm for your entire physical system. When your consciousness expands and finds peace, your heart's electromagnetic field literally changes its tune. The brain, which is essentially just a biological computer, takes a little time to catch up to this new, expansive rhythm. This temporary lag between your heart's new wisdom and your brain's old wiring is exactly where that feeling of deep exhaustion lies. There is a profound warmth in finally understanding this mechanism. You do not need to fight the exhaustion, and you certainly do not need to feel guilty about it. What if, instead of viewing this period as a problem to be solved, you viewed it as a sacred, cozy cocoon? A quiet phase where your physical body is doing the monumental work of rewiring itself to hold more light, more peace, and more presence. You are simply undergoing a natural upgrade. The next time you feel that heavy, tired resistance creeping in, I invite you to try something deeply forgiving. Do not push through it. Do not berate yourself. Instead, take a deep breath. Soften your shoulders and give yourself the grace to just be. Allow the static to play out. In that gentle, quiet space, you aren't disconnecting from life. You are finally tuning into the beautiful, resonant frequency of your own soul. The path forward isn't built on force. It is built on surrender. The modern spiritual marketplace sells you a very specific mechanism for peace. They tell you to step back, detach, and simply watch your thoughts pass by like clouds. This is the foundation of mainstream mindfulness. But have you ever stopped to ask who exactly is sitting in the watchtower? When you divide yourself into the one who acts and the one who watches, you are not achieving enlightenment. You are unknowingly participating in the fragmentation of your own soul. Carl Jung warned us repeatedly about the dangers of splitting the psyche. When you constantly monitor your inner world, you are effectively building the Archonic panopticon within your own mind. You become both the exhausted prisoner and the hyper-vigilant guard. The system no longer needs to control you externally because you have internalized the surveillance. The ego loves this observer state because it feels incredibly superior and detached from the messy, physical reality of the matrix. Consider this. If you instinctively detach from every dark, heavy emotion by safely observing it from a distance, you strip that emotion of its raw, alchemical power. You do not actually heal the underlying wound or release the trapped kinetic energy. You simply place your shadow behind a thick pane of soundproof glass. You can see it screaming, but you refuse to feel its vibration. This is not integration. It is a highly sophisticated form of spiritual bypassing. Watch what happens in your body during these moments of forced detachment. The next time you try to meditate away a profound frustration, notice the sensation that follows. It is often a strange, floating numbness, the feeling of being disconnected from your own limbs. Society calls this state peace, but your soul recognizes it as dissociation. That heavy, artificial stillness is the viscosity of the void. It is a biological failsafe keeping you sedated. The brilliant theorist Ernest Becker understood that the human ego is terrified of its own mortality and vulnerability. To protect itself, it builds towering monuments of denial. Achieving a state of perfect, unbothered spiritual detachment is the ego's ultimate monument. It convinces you that by refusing to be moved by your pain, you have somehow conquered the human condition. But in reality, you have only paralyzed the very avatar you came here to experience. The architects of this density that demiurge thrive on this internal split. A consciousness that is deeply divided between the watcher and the watched cannot generate the unified, explosive energy required to break through the simulation's boundaries. By keeping you trapped in the observer's cage, the matrix ensures that you remain docile. You are heavily anesthetized by the very spiritual practices you thought were setting you free. Your rebellion is neutralized by your own manufactured calm. Let that sink in. The profound quiet you feel after hours of relentlessly policing your own thoughts might not be the quiet of true sovereignty. It might simply be the heavy, stagnant silence of a neutralized threat. You have been subtly tricked into suppressing the exact emotional turbulence that was designed to wake you up. The system has convinced you to numb your timeline pivot points under the guise of finding your zen. But the illusion instantly loses its power the moment you refuse to play the guard. You do not have to sit in that cold, isolated watchtower for the rest of your life. You are allowed to step down into the beautiful, terrifying, chaotic reality of your own emotions. You can let the friction of your anger, the depths of your sorrow, or the fire of your joy consume you for a fleeting moment without losing your eternal nature. When you stop trying to clinically supervise your life and start actively, violently embodying it, the Archonic interference completely collapses. The soundproof glass shatters, the raw, unfiltered energy of your unobserved emotion suddenly floods your nervous system. This is not a loss of control. It is the reclaiming of your vital life force. That dense, heavy energy is the exact metaphysical fuel you need to shatter the current paradigm and jump to a higher timeline. This beautiful integration marks the death of the forced observer and the triumphant rebirth of the sovereign actor. You no longer need to fear the messy currents of your own mind. You stop policing the physical vessel and finally begin breathing true, unhindered life into it. But to harness this wild, kinetic energy without being destroyed by it, we must learn a new way to exist within the friction. We must master the protocol of the linger. When the soundproof glass of the observer's cage finally shatters, the immediate reaction of your biological hardware is pure panic. The mind instinctively scrambles to find a new coping mechanism, a new routine, or a new spiritual concept to safely contain the raw energy of reality. This desperate urge to do something is what we call magnetic navigation. It is the terrified ego desperately trying to steer the ship back into the shallow, familiar waters of the matrix, to permanently break free from the Archonic neural treadmill. We do not need another productive habit. We need a controlled collapse. This is where we initiate the linger protocol. The linger protocol is not a technique you practice. It is the radical suspension of all practice. It is the terrifying, beautiful art of existing entirely in the chaotic space between two heartbeats, refusing to construct a new cage out of your own awareness. The first step of this protocol is the establishment of recognition windows. A recognition window opens in those split seconds when you feel that familiar, heavy exhaustion creeping in the productive irritation of the soul. Usually, this is the exact moment you would reach for a distraction, a mindfulness exercise, or a positive affirmation to forcefully overwrite the discomfort. Instead, you are going to intentionally do nothing. You are simply going to stop. Watch what happens in your body during these moments of deliberate inaction. As you violently resist the urge to fix your internal state, your chest will likely tighten. You might feel a sudden, intense wave of heat flush through your skin, or a visceral fluttering in your stomach. This is the linger test. Your biological system is sounding an alarm because you have suddenly dropped the steering wheel. The ego is terrified of the void. Let that sink in for a moment. The intense anxiety you feel when you force yourself into absolute, uncompromising stillness is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is the agonizing sound of the Archonic machinery breaking down. The system is literally starving because you have suddenly stopped providing the directional energy it needs to sustain the illusion. You are no longer generating the frantic, kinetic friction that feeds the demiurge. By actively lingering in this profound discomfort, you are executing a brilliant metaphysical hack. You are creating a micro-void in your own biological programming. This zero-point suspension is the exact space where the matrix violently falters. Because the simulation relies entirely on your constant, active participation in improving or fixing the avatar. Your sudden refusal to participate causes the false reality around you to slowly dissolve. Now imagine the immense, quiet power that floods your system when the psychic debris finally settles. When you stop fighting the current, the heavy, artificial interference of the world clears away. In this absolute, lingering stillness, the true and filtered language of the universe finally has the silent space it needs to echo. You have stopped speaking the loud language of survival and started listening to the quiet frequency of existence. This is the precise threshold where you begin to witness true synchronicity. As Carl Jung deeply understood, profound synchronicities are not random, happy coincidences. They are literal, mathematical glitches in the architecture of the simulation. However, these glitches only become visible to the human eye when the deafening noise of your constant self-improvement is entirely muted. You can only see the cracks in the wall when you stop painting over them. These sudden, inexplicable alignments in your everyday physical reality are your timeline pivot points. They are cosmic signposts, directly planted by your higher self, pointing toward a sovereign path that your anxious ego could never have meticulously planned. They represent the organic, perfect geometry of your soul asserting its dominance over the artificial lines of the matrix. But they demand your stillness to be decoded. The Linger protocol teaches you the ultimate truth of the awakened consciousness. True, indestructible power lies in suspension. You do not ever need to fight the demiurge, and you do not need to fix the human avatar. You simply need to stop dancing to the frantic, exhausting rhythm of the simulation. When you bravely allow your manufactured reality to collapse without intervention, what remains standing in the rubble is your eternal, untamed sovereignty. Imagine coming home after a long, exhausting day and finally taking off a pair of shoes that have been entirely too tight. That profound, immediate wave of physical relief, the sudden rush of blood, the relaxation of your muscles is exactly what true spiritual sovereignty feels like. For years, you have been trying to force your expansive, beautiful soul into the incredibly tight shoes of modern productivity and relentless self-improvement. You believed that if you just tried a little harder, the pain of those shoes would somehow disappear. But the ultimate truth is incredibly liberating, and it is so gentle. You do not need to fix the shoes. You just need to take them off. The biological hardware you walk around in your brain, your nervous system, your daily habits is a wonderful tool, but it is not who you are. When we talk about detaching from this hardware, we do not mean running away from life or becoming cold and unfeeling. We mean stepping out of the rigid expectations that say you must be a perfectly optimized machine at all times. Think about the immense warmth that washes over you when you finally realize you're not a project that needs to be constantly managed. You are not a broken machine waiting for the right software update. You are the gentle, quiet observer simply experiencing the beauty and the messiness of being human. The pressure to endlessly rewire your brain dissolves into a deep, comforting acceptance of exactly where you are right now. Your value is completely inherent. It is woven into your very existence and needs no further validation. Watch what happens in your body in this precise moment. As you hear these words, notice if your shoulders drop just a fraction of an inch. Notice if your breathing becomes a little deeper, a little softer. That spontaneous relaxation is not just a psychological response. It is a profound somatic cue. It is your nervous system finally receiving the permission it has been begging for. The permission to stop fighting, to stop striving, and to simply rest in the warm glow of your own awareness. There will always be noise in the world. The old, frantic rhythms of society will continue to buzz around you, asking for your attention and your energy. But once you have anchored yourself in this quiet, sovereign space, that noise no longer has the power to control your timeline. You can observe the chaos of everyday life without feeling the desperate need to organize it. You can feel the deep, natural friction of being alive without assuming that something is terribly wrong with you. If you have felt exhausted, lost, or completely drained by the endless treadmill of self-improvement, I want you to hear this clearly. Your exhaustion is simply the beautiful, necessary bridge to your freedom. It is the end of the old way of doing things. Step completely out of the loop, stop fixing the avatar, and start embracing the magnificent, unburdened observer within. You are safe, you are whole, and you are finally awake. Welcome home.